On episode 56 of Chit Chat, we ask the question, how much of a board game do you consume? Sometimes our eyes can be a little too big for our gaming stomachs, but we're still playing plenty, just at an acceptable distance.
Welcome back to Chit Chat, everybody.
This is episode 56. Welcome. As you can tell, things are a little different. We've all quarantined ourselves. We haven't been going over to Jeremy's set, partly because he's acting so weird, but mostly because of COVID-19. So this is episode 56, and we're going to talk a little bit about how much of a game do you play? And we mean one game, because a lot of games come with so much content, and then there's other games that come out, and then there's an expansion and another expansion and another expansion, and then you may not ever play them. But before we get to any of that, we do have a winner from the last episode. Jeremy?
Yes, so Run, Fight, or Die Reloaded, that is going to John Webster. So just email us at manvsmeeple@gmail.com to collect your prize. And this week we're going to give away Circadian's First Light. This is another game from Shim Phillips from Garfield Games. So make a comment below or anytime during the stream, and you're going to be entered to win.
So, awesome. What, Jeremy, are we going to lead?
I can lead. Well, I mean, as you said, there's a lot of ways we can approach this subject. Like, what is too much of a game? How much do you really need? So before we get into that, I counted actually on my shelf back here, which you guys can't really see, but there's 98 games that are back here. Of these 98 games, 59 of them have extra content or expansions in some sort. That may be a full-on expansion or, you know, like a tile from BGG that you can buy or something they gave away at conventions. Out of those 59, I have 56 of them. Everything.
Oh, so you would call yourself a completionist?
I would 100% call myself a completionist. So, but the other side of that, when I look at games like, for instance, underneath of these shelves, I have a whole collection of things in these drawers down here. One of those is Thunderstone Quest, which is a game that I've been a fan of for a long time. That's been one of my first deck builders I ever played, and when they reissued the game, I, of course, bought all the content. And, of course, they're re-releasing new content, you know, every 6 months for the game. I still haven't played any of the content I got from the Kickstarter, but I'm still backing those, which is really weird. I mean, why am I backing them if I'm not playing them? But I think that just speaks to, like, I'm a gamer as much as I am a collector of some of these things.
Well, yeah, you just started collecting Star Wars cards again, right?
Yeah.
Which you'd gotten away from. And in fact, there's a number of times where you've gotten rid of a game and gotten it again. But to your point on Thunderstone, I recently played Castles of Burgundy, and I played the new version. So the new version that just recently came out, you guys brought me back one from Essen last year, and I just got it to the table with my sons. It was their first time playing the game. And in that box, there's a ton of content. So it includes all the expansions, some of which I had. It includes some stuff I've never seen before. But I was thinking when we played it, because they had never played, I played with the original boards, which is how I've typically played Castles of Burgundy. So I haven't really even scratched the surface of a lot of what even comes in that box, let alone the original version, which even just had another side to the player board. Like, there's some base content sometimes that I don't even get to. For instance, again, Death May Cry, or Death May Die.
Yeah.
Death May Cry, Devil May Cry. Death May Die is the game that comes with so much content, and I am going to try to get through it, but there's so much that if I had to bet, I probably won't get through every single episode.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah,
you're Ryan.
The way that you combine everything in Death May Die, and it reminds me a lot of The Others, which is another game that I went crazy for The Others when that first came out. I backed at the Kickstarter level to get everything, and I have played a tenth of it. There are boxes of this that I haven't even opened yet, where I'm sitting on like all of these new units you can use, scenarios you can play, monsters you can fight. And I don't know when I'm going to ever play that, to be honest.
Yeah, what about you, Kira?
I mean, I am absolutely a completionist. When I was taking pictures of some of the games earlier, like Tang Garden, as an example, like I got everything that came with the game. I realized I missed out on like the metal coins, like the one thing I don't have that I absolutely will need to get, but they're sold out right now. But the fact is like I have games that take up entire shelves. And it's not just Tank Garden. Like I have Everdell. There's 4 boxes for Everdell now, and that all doesn't fit in one box. And the difference between those 2 games in my head really is that one of them I'm going to probably dive into all the content, and the other one I haven't even punched it yet, right? So, and that's Everdell. Like I now Ryan and I played Pearlbrook, and so we have actually played it, but it wasn't my copy, and so my copy stayed unpunched. And I realized it today when I opened it up to take pictures, and I just got the 2 new expansions in, and I'm sitting there going, wow, I haven't touched any of this. And I don't know why. Certain games I do that with and other ones I don't, but I have to have all the content for them so that I can, when and if I choose to, dive into all of it.
One of the cool things I enjoy is what CMON's been doing lately for a lot of their games. The Marvel United game, The Death May Die, David, is that when they put a game on Kickstarter, it's pretty much all the content for that game you will ever get. Or going back to even like Rising Sun, which makes me more inclined to actually play through all that content. Like you've probably played a lot of those scenarios now, had a lot of the different monsters in there. Rising Sun's the same way. You have all that stuff right then, so you're not chasing yourself 6 months later to relearn the game, number one,
That's
which
true.
is a feat all in of itself. Plus, you have all that content right there just to start playing the game naturally. And I find myself, especially with Rising Sun, I've experienced all the content. I mean, I've played with all the monsters, I've played with all the cards in one fashion or another. So I'm not chasing content every 6 months and having to relearn the game. And I appreciate that from CMON that they're doing that. Now, I do think that they're probably missing some back-end sales expansion always spurs further sales, of course. But it's really easy to dive into the content and start playing everything right away when you have everything that could possibly be for the game. And I don't think they've done that any differently. I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think any of their Kickstarters have delivered extra content after that Kickstarter.
After the fact?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, I don't think they have.
On the flip side of that, though, there are times when I will like find a game and obsess over it and get every piece of content that ever comes out of that. And Marvel Champions, I think, is a great example of that, the counterpoint, because new content for Marvel Champions is coming out on a monthly or every couple months basis, and I will buy every piece of Marvel Champions content and I will use all of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's...
Brian dropped out a little.
Did we just lose Jeremy's audio?
No, we hear you. No, I think that's pretty much... I think the reason for that, Ryan, though, especially with Marvel Champions, is because that system was made to deliver every month. Like, you know you're going to get something new every month. You're already invested in Marvel. That's a lot easier for a game, number one, that has the price point that it does, where you're investing another $10 to $20 a month to keep playing something you already enjoy. It's a lot harder to go back to a heavier Euro game. Again, that you may have to relearn the rules to, and you may only have a limited number of people that you can play that game with. But I still find myself doing that with a lot of these games. I'm looking at Fields of Arl. I've played the expansion once. I've played the base game numerous times, but I bought an expansion that I've played once. And that's the case for all these games back here. I've played probably several of the expansions once or maybe not at all.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask, Jeremy. How many of those do you think you haven't played at all? Because I have a stack of games that I set aside here right next to me of games that I love. And that's the thing, is you'll find these games that you absolutely love. And I have some that are in my top 10 for which I've bought additional content, and I haven't yet played that content. But I bought it because I respect the game so much, and it's in my top 10. Games like Seasons. I think there was a total of 2 expansions for Seasons, maybe I think 2. And I've played a little with the second one, but I don't think I've ever played Seasons with absolutely every single card included in the game at once.
Well,
same thing with Wingspan.
Looking back at this shelf back here, David, I mean, Mombasa, Great Western Trail, I've played the expansion. Coimbra, I have not. Teotihuacan, I have not. I have Wingspan. I've not played the Newton with the new expansion. I played with my wife just the other day, but we played the base game. And, of course, Seventh Continent, no, not even close. I mean, that's got so much content in there. But even then, I backed the second, thing that came out for it, and I haven't touched it at this point. It's not because
David, you brought up Wingspan.
Yeah.
David brought up Wingspan, and we were talking about that just like yesterday, right? You haven't even touched your European expansion content yet, whereas mine I fully have integrated into the box. It's all mixed in. I don't even know which birds are which anymore because I've got everything into one box because to me that's a game like it doesn't matter. That content just adds to the game, adds to the base game. And I see some people in the comments saying the same thing, right? They want a game, they'll get the expansions for a game if it adds to the base game. But if it's something that's going to like drastically change things, maybe they're not as inclined, or if it's going to make you have to take something out in order to use it, they're maybe not as inclined to get those expansions. And I can see that, right? Because you already like what's there and you want it to be easy to add the new content, not a chore. Since again, not all of us have all the time in the world to set up a game. And when you're talking about expansions, like Everdell, for instance, like one of the expansions, you have to, it removes the tree from the game. It's a different thing. So it changes the whole overall game and how it's going to work. So anyway, but back to Wingspan, I think, Jeremy, you probably wrapped all yours into one box by now as well, huh?
Yeah, everything's in there. I actually just played that 2 nights ago. So
Yeah,
I mean, that's a game
have
that it's easy to
all of
play.
mine
Go ahead.
Yeah, I have all of mine in one box too. And in fact, I was one of the first people to order it as soon as it became available on his site. I got it, I put it in the box, and I haven't played it. I don't know why. I think one other thing I wanted to mention, Jeremy brought up Marvel Champions, and then Ryan talked about it a bit. That's a big difference with that, right? Because Marvel Champions is pretty much the same game. That's like the epitome of the same game with just more content. Whereas, like Jeremy said, with some of these Euros, not only do you have to go back and reread the rules for the game itself sometimes, but sometimes they add so much of a unique, different aspect to the game that you really have to get your head wrapped around that as well. Like there's extra board or 2 extra boards, and they do all these different things. Whereas Marvel Champions, they do add some different mechanics, but it's all sort of very similar to the base game.
Yeah, and I think Jeremy hit the nail on the head earlier when he was talking about all this Kickstarter content, because now a lot of Kickstarters will come with the expansions, and you'll get 4 or 5, maybe expansions that come with that, and you're buying these expansions for a game that you don't actually know that you're going to like or not. So what you end up doing, is having all this content for a game that you might not like, or even if you do. For example, I backed the Walking Dead game, No Sanctuary, and I love the base game, but I haven't even played through that content. I don't know when I will ever even unwrap the expansion stuff, because there's just so much of it that comes with these games anymore.
So there's a good point to that, right? So there's somebody in the comments, Nathan actually, is saying that he finds that expansions make it to his table less often because he tends to be playing with new groups. And those expansions, like I mentioned a moment ago, are adding new mechanics that the newer players don't want, or it's adding too steep of a learning curve to a game that they're already trying to learn. So that's another good point. Like if you're somebody who's always playing with a new group or an entry-level group or whatever, adding expansion content can be a little bit tedious, right?
I don't know how many times I've played the first beginner set of First Class, because I teach First Class to everyone. And there are still some scenario packs in First Class that I've never used.
Yeah, the answer to your Walking Dead is you will never play them.
It's probably not. There's so much content.
Yeah. Well,
That's
going
the
back.
thing.
Go ahead, David.
I was just going to say, some of these games, when you're getting into them, they are, you have to dedicate yourself to the game like that. Like Death May Die, I have to dedicate myself to that. You can't just casually have that on the shelf and get it out every once in a while. It has to be almost Gloomhaven-esque in terms of how you approach it. You have to say, we are going to play that every other time we get together. We're going to do another. If everyone likes it, and everyone I've played with really enjoys that game, so it is the kind of game that can do that. But that, the Walking Dead game, some of the
Joan of Arc.
Joan of Arc is another example. Any of those Kickstarters that basically come in 18 different shipments on your front doorstep and take up the whole doorstep, like, it's so overwhelming to look at all that and think, am I ever going to see, even half of what's in these boxes?
Right. One Eric Link mentioned that he never plays the base taverns. I imagine he's talking about Taverns of Tiefenthal. Or,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's not really an expansion. It's part of the game. But that's how I kind of approach a lot of these games that do have expansions. I'll look at a game like Wingspan now, and if I'm introducing that to first-time players, I'll play with all the content. I'll play with the European birds as well because it's pretty simple game. But if you're talking about a game like maybe Feast for Odin, that adds more content to a game that's already pretty complex for new beginners. So in that case, I may not play the expansion. So Taverns is one of those games that it all comes together, and you kind of want to play that way from the start because it just adds that kind of element of being more inclusive with all the mechanics. Like it really makes the game better.
Well, that is a good point because some expansions are like that as well, where you bring in an expansion that has like 4 or 5 modules and you can't use all of them at once. I tend to just like maybe find a favorite module, like with Underwater Cities, use that one, and the rest of them never get played.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to talk. I only have one more. I don't know if you guys do, but I'll go first for our last games of this topic. And this is a game that's near and dear to my heart, so I have mixed feelings about this, but it's Vindication. And Vindication has so much content, and it's almost expansion-like content in the box. And there's one significant element that you can add, which adds the little triangular token that you use, which I cannot play without. And I'd never recommend anyone playing without. However, on the other hand, it basically doubles the game's complexity in terms of like what you're trying to bite off with new players. And I've introduced that to new players so much. I said, I'm sorry, I've already talked to you 15 minutes about how do you play this game, but I've got to tell you about this token, and there's 14 things you can do with it. Like, and it's crazy, and I love it. But that's a great example of a game that just has an insane amount of content. And in fact, unlike what you were just talking about, Ryan, I think you can play with literally everything in Vindication, which I have never done, nor will I ever do, but because it's just it's way too much going on. Most of the players at the table won't even scratch the surface of half of it.
I think
coming back to the original question, though, Ryan, real quick. Coming back to that original question, though, out of the 4 of you guys, do you all feel, including myself, do you guys chase that expansion? Like, if today an expansion was announced for Great Western Trail, the second expansion, do you immediately want to buy the game? Or do you even look at it? Do you read the rules first? Or do you just look at that game and say, that's one of my favorite games, I'm buying it no matter what?
Kira, why don't you lead off? Or Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, that's it. That's exactly why I have 4 boxes of Everdell, and I haven't touched 3 pieces of the new content really, because I know I love Everdell. I want everything that comes for it, and a lot of games are that way. So I will immediately back. I mean, another great example of this for me was when I was really into Mage Wars, which I just gave my copy away. I'm getting ready to ship it out actually. But for the longest time, every convention, I knew Arcane Wonders did a new promo card each day of a show. So I always stopped by their booth every day of every show I went to because I'd always get new promo cards. I want every single piece of content for that game that I can possibly get my hands on. Did I ever play with all those? No, but I have them, and I want them, and I need them in my collection.
It's 'cause you were pot committed, right? Like at a certain point, you feel like, well, there's only 2 more promos. Like I have to get those.
Have to.
Ryan, what about you?
Yeah, I know. I am not as bad when it comes to promos. Like, I won't do the big promo hunt. I won't spend all the money to get the promos. Now, if there's like a Kickstarter that I didn't back that I end up really loving, and there was maybe some like exclusives, like I had to hunt down the Blood Rage monsters because I didn't back at the all-in level back then. I wish I had, because I ended up spending way more on that game overall. But then if I've heard a expansion just doesn't work, or expansion is not important to the game, I'll skip it. But generally I do want to have every expansion to a game. Like, I'm not as much of a completionist with the promos, but I do want the expansions.
What about you, David?
So to answer that question, I've learned now it just depends on the game. Like you said, Great Western Trail, no would be the answer, because I still have the expansion #1 and haven't played it. So, and the same thing goes with Marvel Champions. I'm up to date. I own everything there is to own in terms of content for Marvel Champions. but I haven't yet played a ton of it. Like I haven't had the chance to play or made the chance to play as much as you guys. So I still have Ultron to fight. I have Green Goblin. I have everything Ultron on to fight, and I haven't even experimented with all the heroes either. So when Doctor Strange or whatever the next one that comes out, I might wait. The only thing that would change my mind there is because there's been a little bit of a scarcity with some of that, and I don't want to regret not having it if I ever get back into it in a deep way.
For me, I mean, I already mentioned that 56 of my 59 expansions are games back here that have expansions I have something for. So I am a completionist. I think I always had that collector gene in me where I have to have everything for it, whether that's buying the expansions or hunting down the promos or, they always have those German expansions at Essen with all those, the advent calendar there.
Oh, yeah.
All have those little things. So I hunt those down as well. In fact, I was so bad last year, I don't remember what time it was, but it had to have been spring where I went through the majority of these games back here and I did a BGG search for them. And then when you look at all the expansions for them, I was going through my collection to figure out what I was missing and then doing BGG purchases in the BGG store from people that own those pieces to make sure I had everything for those games. But since that time, I mean, I've, thanks to Rodney over at Watch It Played, him and I talked for a little bit about just calling your collection and trying to keep the games that really mean something to you. So that's curtailed quite a bit. I'm not backing as many Kickstarters anymore. I'm not buying expansions to games that I really don't love or play anymore. So I've been a little more diligent in the past 6 months than I have ever before in my life. So, all right.
Quick, I was going to say, I want to address the question in the comments. This is a good question to answer really quick. Have you ever been tempted to buy just a box that like stores a game and all of its expansions? If the box is nice enough, would you buy just an empty box to store all your stuff?
If the box isn't labeled as such, and for instance, if it was just a box that stored all the stuff, no. If it's a box like Raiders of the North Sea that can store all the game components, or Champions of Midgard's a good one, that can store all the components from all the expansions into one box that has like the wrappings of Champions of Midgard, yes. But if it's just a box, no. I mean, as you can see, I've got my collection all here and some kind of semblance of order. I like to display them as well. So not for me, no.
For me, it's like going to be dependent on the game. So for instance, Broken Token makes this awesome box for Firefly called the Big Damn Box, right? And it is gorgeous, and it's gonna store the playmat. I'm still hunting the playmat down, but the box is quite expensive, but it is on my list of things to get because Firefly specifically has so much content and the boxes don't all match evenly, so I can't really put them on a shelf together. So in that case, I want the big damn box. I don't want all the individuals, but Villainous, I don't want a big box for that. I want those next to each other. I like the way that looks. But then I go back to like Everdell, and while I have all the collector's editions and those boxes are really pretty, I kind of want to store everything in one box, and I'd be really eager to get one that stores the tree put together in that box as well, so I don't have to take it apart every single time. So it really just depends for me on the game and what's available, and if it makes sense against what my aesthetic choices are for storing my games as well.
So my short answer, yes, I'd get one. Slightly longer answer, yes, I got one for Space Base, the command box that includes that. And then the last little bit on that, my guilty admission is that I haven't played through all of that expansion, the Shy Pluto expansion. But I really want to, but that's an interesting expansion because you kind of have to introduce it slowly over several play sessions. So, Ryan, what about you?
I mean, I'm a sucker for boxes. I even built my own custom like Marvel box, and I think Jeremy did too, to hold all your Marvel stuff. And I have the big Champions of Midgard one. They look really nice. And if like Seventh Continent came out with like a giant box that held both sets of Seventh Continent stuff, I'd buy that in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Rising Sun needs one for sure. That'd be a good one. Although Broken Token does make something. Yeah. Yep. All right, so obviously we've been separated because of COVID-19. So none of us have really seen each other other than on our front porch step where you guys have come and picked up some equipment from me. But you guys have been playing with your family and our family, who are friends. What have you guys been playing over the past, my goodness, it's been what?
It feels like it's been a
3
while.
weeks, 4 weeks since
At
we've
least
actually
3
been
weeks.
together as a group.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ryan, you can start. What have you been playing?
Yeah, so I've dived into, Tabletop Simulator and Tabletopia a lot lately, and I'm finally getting into a game that I've always wanted to play, and that's Arkham Horror, the card game. And I know Kira loves this game. I've never played
yeah.
it, but Tabletop Simulator has this awesome Arkham setup with a really great player board and a great map, and it does everything for you. So like when you choose a scenario, you can just like hit a button and all the locations come out. Like it just makes the game really easy to play.
Oh yeah.
And
Setup is so easy.
Yeah, and it's just the game is fun. Like I am super sucked in. I was like, okay, I'll give it a chance. After our first session, I was like neck deep in the Arkham database, like trying to build decks and find all these cards, and I'm like full on obsessed now. So I plan on, playing a lot of that.
Anything else?
Well, I've actually been spending a lot of my time during this playing Neo, and I think you probably have too. Neo is actually a video game, not a board game. But we dig these video games sometimes, and Neo is just like a really intense Dark Souls-like game, and it's addictive, and there's so much to do in the game, and there's so many satisfying combos and weapons to try. Like I will just be hooked on this game probably for a long time.
I'm really surprised that you are just now getting into the Souls type of games. Because
Yeah.
I had this conversation before.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we both, I think many of us come from MMO backgrounds where we played a lot of those MMOs. And these give me that same feel of like walking around a corner and just being like, wow, I've discovered something new. And they're almost like raids at the end. When those bosses, they're really challenging bosses, and you get this euphoric feel when you defeat them, just like you would any kind of raid boss. So I'm really surprised that you're just now getting into this game. And I think you should go back and play all the Dark Souls.
Oh, yeah.
And at least
Bloodborne.
Bloodborne, yeah. I mean, those are great games.
I did play the first Dark Souls game, and it just, for me at least, at the time it just felt so repetitive. Like I also wasn't great at it, so like I was playing that first section like maybe for 4 hours, and I was like, okay, I'm just done with this, and I never went back to Dark Souls. And I played Bloodborne a little bit, but I never really dove into one until Neo 2.
Yeah. They're super satisfying games.
Yeah, they really are.
Kira, what have you been playing?
Oh, I mean, not as much as I would like, because I've had some things going on that have kept me from being like settled in any one place, taking care of my dad and having to be home and work and everything. But we have gotten a few online games in, and I talked about some of them on the Weekly Rewind, so I won't rehash too much. But I do want to talk about briefly at least Ankh and Tekkenu. Those two games we both have played on Tabletop Simulator, Tabletopia, or a combination thereof, to see the games in action and to learn the games from our publisher friends, so that we can have a feel for them before they get to us, before they launch on Kickstarter, all the different things. And that's been a really interesting and fun experience. It's different because we're used to being able to sit down and actually either play with the designer or the publisher, or maybe get a copy in our hands. But everything's so delayed right now because of COVID. We've had to make some of these adjustments. And so I'll first talk about Tekkenu because it was incredible experience for us. And we don't have any pictures of it just yet because it was
We have some Tabletop Simulator photos, actually.
Yeah. So, but the Tekkenu was, I don't know, I really liked it. I know you guys all probably have an opinion. We all played together, so that was a lot of fun for me. And then I'll let you guys talk about it yourselves. What do you guys think about Tekkenu? I really enjoyed it. I found it super enjoyable.
I really enjoyed it quite a bit. I think we all said that we ended up enjoying it even maybe a little bit more than Teotihuacan. Mm-hmm. And I definitely did. I don't dislike Teotihuacan, but Tekkenu had really, at its heart, an excellent dice drafting game, and it had some unique mechanisms where you're balancing the dice because you're taking some dice that are tainted and some that are pure, and then you have to balance those dice. So, because every 4 dice that you end up taking, you have to try to get as balanced as possible between those two sides. So you could take some really powerful dice when the time is right, but it might set you off balance. And then there's just a number of different things you're doing, plus a ton of unique cards that you can pick up that really make your game quite different than everyone else's.
Yeah, I would agree. Teotihuacan was up there for me in the top 10, a year ago or 2 years ago? I don't even remember when. But to me, it's a better game. It's a lot simpler. I like the aspect where the feedback loop is really quick. Like you do something and you get something, where Teotihuacan, it's more of a slow burn. When you do something, you have to play in several turns in advance. And that's really satisfying to me. Plus the whole aspect of how those dice shift. So you are planning a turn ahead on where dice may or may not be, but it's super satisfying game with a lot of different things that you can do and a lot of different ways to approach victory. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, a lot of different ways to gain points and to and like we talked about this compared to Teotihuacan, or like Trismegistus, for instance, which is a game I really liked from Board and Dice, but it was just too much for my brain at the end of it, and it's not one that I can see myself. This one is, again, an approachable, not going to take me a ton of time to get up and set up and play, not going to take me a ton of time to teach somebody. I'm excited to get it and play it again and get a copy for myself, of course. So, Ryan, what did you think about it?
I personally loved it. I mean, I took the tabletop code, which I think you did as well, and I took it and played it with some of my friends who also really enjoyed it. It's just the kind of Euro that I enjoy. I love those dice placement games. I love like what David mentioned about those cards that you can kind of tailor your game with these cards and kind of build a little engine that's going on in the background. And I do like it better than Teotihuacan just because Teotihuacan can be very punishing. If you are just a little bit off in your planning, it can mess with your whole game. And I think that Tekenyu is more forgiving, which maybe some people won't like that, but I really enjoy that aspect.
Yeah, so the game we're talking about, guys, is Tekenyu. It's from Board and Dice. It's another game from Daniel Tassini and David Turtzi. It's same designer from Teotihuacan and Zolkin. So if you have any questions about what we're trying to say, Tekenyu. And it's coming to retail. It's not going to Kickstarter. It's going straight to retail.
Right. But one that is coming to Kickstarter is the other game that I was going to talk about.
Trip to Egypt?
Our trip to Egypt. So it was Ankh, the gods of Egypt, as Eric made sure that we were supposed to say the colon. So designed by Eric Lane. It's going to be published by Come On, and it's coming to Kickstarter next week. And Jeremy and I at least have seen it a few times. I think David might have seen it at least one time before this in prototype form in very early stages. So we've got to see this evolve over time. Jeremy made a big post on Facebook about it today, so I'm sure he'll have plenty to say about this as well. But for me, what I really liked about it, and I am somebody who has never played the two previous games in the series. I've never played Rising Sun. I've never played Blood Rage. I know they're great games, but they've not appealed to me for a variety of reasons, mostly just amount of stuff going on. And I was just like, I don't know. This game was super approachable. It was really easy to learn, but it clearly has some depth to it. And it was fun to watch the evolution of the game over time and to see where it is now when it's getting ready. It's this final version, if you will. And just the nuances there. And I could kind of see all the, cogs ticking in my head. What am I going to do? How am I going to make sure I'm the one? And I got to play a god, Anubis, so when other people's warriors that are out there in these battles that we'll be having in these different regions die, I can actually bring them to me and bring more strength because I am, after all, the god of the underworld. And you're gaining worshipers. And I guess I should back up and say this is a game where you're facing monotheism, and so you're wanting to be the god that survives. Everybody kind of going, the old gods are dead, the new gods, and we've seen this in some movies and stuff over the years. But this is the battle for that. This is the battle to be the one that survives, or maybe merge with another god and survive that way as well. But I found the game super enjoyable. We got a nice taste of it last night with Eric. David, what did you think?
I'll let Jeremy go on and about it because I know he'll want to. But the couple things that I'd mentioned, one, the way the actions work is really cool to me. That was one of my big takeaways. The progression of the game is very, very much player controlled, and you definitely feel that in this game. every time the turn comes back around to you, you're almost going to be faced with maybe not necessarily progressing the game, but doing things that you know will ultimately progress the game before it gets back around to you. So, and I think Jeremy mentioned in his Facebook post, it's a lot about timing. I'm not good at those games where I have to figure out the timing. Jeremy's great at those kind of games.
Yeah.
But the action selection is really cool, and then the cards that you use in battles is really cool. What I found fascinating, and I've played Rising Sun, I've played Blood Rage maybe twice. I've played Rising Sun a few more times. It's amazing to me to see Eric make a game that feels genetically similar to those games, but at the same time quite different in some meaningful ways. And while it's more accessible on some fronts, it certainly doesn't mean that it is a light game by any means.
No, it's
Like,
definitely
I
not a
wouldn't say so.
cakewalk.
I would squarely put this right in the same camp as Rising Sun. In fact, Kira, I'd tell you, if you like this, you should probably give Rising Sun a try.
I'll
We'll
do that.
schedule a game
You gonna
after
teach
the
me?
quarantine.
Sure.
And Jeremy, I know
Jeremy, take the
Yeah,
stage.
well, I'll be brief. I made a post on Facebook about my initial thoughts, and there's a couple things that I think. I think this is probably going to be the most divisive of the three games. Like, people really love Blood Rage and people really love Rising Sun, but if you played both of those games and you're truly devoted to one or the other, I think this game is going to be very different, number one, than either of those two games. For a variety of reasons. Number one, it does have player elimination, and it is probably a 90 to 2 hour game, 90-minute to 2 hour game. So players can be eliminated, but it's on the tail end of the game. So it's very near the end of the game when players can be eliminated. So that's one of the ways the game can end. The other thing that I think people may or may not like is the way that all the miniatures are handled, from the gods to the warriors to they're calling them guardians, which are basically the monsters. They're all one strength. It's just about having the most people in an area. However, strength is upgraded through your Ankh power. So if you get specific Ankh powers by upgrading, you can kind of manipulate your ability to do strength in those regions by having more people there, plus the cards that you're using in combat, which is very different than Blood Rage and Rising Sun, because all those have some kind of inherent strength. You bring a big Godzilla in, it's 5 strength, it's going to mow people over. In this game, it's very, very different. So people may or may not like that. The thing that's fascinating to me is that timing aspect, and David hit it on the head, is the actions. You get 2 actions per turn. That's all you get to take. One action has to be below the other action you take, and there's 4 basic actions. As you place those, you're basically setting other people up to do stuff depending upon the timing. And as that timing ticks down on each of those 4 action tracks, they trigger events, and those events are what really pushes the game forward. And if you trigger an event, you're going to do something specifically on the board better than someone else at that time. So it's really about trying to take the right actions, not always the best actions, but also trying to time when certain things are going to go into combat, when certain monuments are going to pay out. So you're constantly looking around to do different things. Now, having said all that, don't think that my perception of the game is bad. I think it's a really smart game, but it's going to take me multiple plays to figure out where it sits among those pantheon of those 3 games, because it plays very different. And the way that the timing is very different. There is no round structure in the game. So unlike Blood Rage and unlike Rising Sun, when you know combat's going to take place at a certain space, you don't know in this game. It's all player controlled. So one player can take actions that doesn't trigger the combat, and that could happen several turns in a row, and then bam, combat happens, and you may not be in the right space at the right time. Having said all that stuff, it looks gorgeous, like any CMON game. I'm sure there's going to be multiple different expansions. They're going to bring in more Guardians, more gods to play. All the components are really nice, and the gameplay is super smooth. It's the easiest of all the games to learn, but probably the hardest to master, because there's a lot of different things you have to pay attention to, especially the timing.
Really quick, while you're
That's
talking
my first
about
impressions.
sorry, while you're talking about how the game looks, I did want to point out that CMON actually gave us a special, like, exclusive piece of artwork for us to show off here in the game. I don't know exactly what figure this is, but it does look pretty cool. So I'm going to throw that up there. I think this may be actually one of the gods. Is that right, Kira?
Osiris.
That was one of our
I think
gods.
so.
I think that's
So-
Osiris.
That's a pretty cool looking
pretty.
piece of artwork. So that's a little exclusive look at that. So
Yeah, people should be
Another
excited
thing,
for this game. Go ahead.
Yeah, while we're on the topic of just Tabletopia and Tabletop Simulator in general, that is what we've been doing. These are, for a lot of us, new experiences. For me, for sure, and I think for Jeremy too. I don't think before last week he and I had been on Tabletopia or Tabletop Simulator. I had Tabletopia, and I've always had the feel that I didn't like the manual aspect of it, but I did, I guess, with the right games placed in front of me, ones that I really want to try. I sort of buckled down and learned how to do that. And it does take some getting used to, but it is a really high fidelity experience. It looks so much better than a lot of the other websites that do board games. And I love those too. In fact, I've been playing on Board Game Arena. I finally, the three of you should know, I have played Tobago recently, even though I've been begging the three of you to play on there with me, and no one is willing to do so. I did play that with Alicia, and I tried it with Rob from Blue Peg Pink Peg.
Alicia's here in the comments, by the way.
I didn't see that, but I'm glad she's there. Has she said anything bad about me?
No, but
We
she was
wouldn't tell
talking
you.
about seasons. Our conversation making her think about seasons and stuff like that earlier.
Yeah, so we've been playing a lot online, and like Ryan said too, I did take that code because I was very enthusiastic about Tekenyu after I had a chance to play it, and they gave us a code that allowed us to invite when we want some people. So I had, again, Rob and some of the guys from Blue Peg Pink Peg, and I think Marty from Rolling Dice jump in. We didn't get through a whole game because the teach is not insignificant. It's not a huge teach. Teaching it and getting people comfortable with Tabletopia at the same time can take some doing. So we played half the game up to the first scoring. Other than that, I've been playing here. My boys are trapped in the house with me, just like everyone else's kids. The silver lining there is that they can't refuse me every day to play board games. So they've come out and they played Death May Die with me a couple times. They loved it the first time. They wanted to play a second time, so we're going to actually try to play more of that. And then I got them to table to play Pulsar 2849. Also like that one. And then last night we played Castles of Burgundy, the new edition. That was probably lowest so far on their radar. They did enjoy it, but they like Pulsar and Death May Die the best. So I'm thinking about maybe doing a small series while we're still under quarantine where I let viewers pick the next game on my shelf that I force my sons to play with me.
And Alicia's reminding you that you played Oceans as well, David.
Oh, yes, we played Oceans. Ben and Alicia and I played Oceans. Ben had actually watched, I think this is probably the only bit of content he's ever watched on MVM, but he watched our Oceans playthrough when Jeremy and Ryan and I played it. And he had played Evolution way back in the day, so we played that. And Ben, we thought Ben crushed. He's very good at games. Neither of them particularly like playing games, but Ben and Spencer are both great. Ben just has a knack for them. But the game was really tight. All those games, in fact, other than Death May Die, were very tight scores. It was a lot of fun for all of us.
Cool. I mentioned a lot of the games that I played on the Rewind on Sunday, so you guys can go watch that to see that. The only one I'm going to talk about today is the one over my shoulder, Forgotten Waters. This is the first game coming from Plaid Hat Games as their own new publisher because they have left the Asmodee umbrella, and this is their own thing. And it's done by Isaac, the same guy that did Dead of Winter, so it's a Crossroads game. And it's very, very unique. It is you are pirates on a ship that is cooperatively moves around the board, and it's all driven by an app on your phone. And it's really well done. It's really well voiced. The sound effects are really good. I've only played it solo. There is a variant. It says 3 to 5 on the box, but you can play it one player or two player with a variant that's there on the app. You just need to read that and make rules adjustments as you see fit. I don't know how I feel about it as a solo game. It's fine. It's fun. It's an adventure game, so it's more about the story than the gameplay mechanics itself. As a 2 or 3 player game, I can see where the joy comes in because you're splitting your actions up amongst different players and trying to make your pirate the most notorious or infamous of all of them, which I think is probably better. And when you look on the app itself, there's multiple different chapters. I think there's 4 or 5 of them on there, and each of these chapters is broken into smaller parts. And I tried the first chapter twice, and I died both times. And you can lose in a variety of different ways. And then I tried it this morning, and I actually got to the end of the first chapter and the first story in that chapter. So there's a really cool save mechanic where it tells you exactly all the tracks that you need to save, how your map is set up, and then you take all of those things into the second part of that chapter, and it keeps going. I don't know if you can go all those things from chapter 1 to chapter 2, but all those self-contained parts are broken down, and it was really fun. I mean, I had fun with it. I don't think it's a hardcore gamers game, but it's a really fun, like just beer and pretzels fun, story-driven adventure game.
Cool.
Awesome.
I wanted to say one last thing too. I won't give it out on this stream, but if everyone wants to join us in our Discord, I, for one, I don't want to put everyone else on the spot, although I am willing to share my username in all of those different, on BGA and on Tabletop Simulator and Tabletopia. Would love to get some games in with any of you that want to try something. So come to our Discord, and we'll find one of the channels on there to share some of our usernames.
Cool. Well, that is it for Chit Chat episode 56. Hope you guys are safe with your families or whoever you're stuck with. Let us know in the comments below what you guys are playing, if you're playing anything, if you're playing any video games. You can also ask for our PS4 or maybe our Steam names, because I'm always on there doing something. I don't know what, but something. And be safe, and hopefully we will be out of quarantine soon. See you guys.
Bye, everybody.